Is this running now? Okay. Let's introduce ourselves. Would you tell us who you are?
Well, I'm Charlotte Kramer, and I'm Senior Buyer and Merchandise Coordinator for the Dress Division. And I've been at the Saks for 49 years.
At 49?
Yes. And I got, as this is, I got the first QT award.
And what was the QT award?
The best corporate merchandising executive.
Oh.
Isn't that nice?
I think that's pretty terrific. That was the first one.
That was the first one they gave.
And who gave it?
At that time, I think it was Mel Jacobs, yes.
Oh. That was what
I'm
year?
imagining, it must have been 83.
Mm-hmm. So you've been here from, as they say, from the beginning.
Yes.
And Adam was the beginning?
Adam was the beginning.
So give us a feeling of what those days were like.
Oh, they were wonderful. I mean,
had what job?
I was a sales associate.
Mm-hmm.
And I really came to Saks just to...
What was the sales associate?
People. Salesperson. We call it sales associate now.
It's lovely.
Because it makes it a nicer thing. I really did not want a merchandising career. I was just interested in people and merchandise.
Talk a little louder.
And
don't look at that.
Oh,
Don't look at that. Don't look at that. Just talk to me. It's a memory trip.
Oh. Well, I just wanted to be that. I was not interested in figures. I was very interested in people and in merchandise. And I did not go the usual way. I did not become they wanted to make me an assistant buyer or a head stock or anything like that. And then eventually, just because I sold more than anybody else, and I obviously handled people very well, they forced me to be a buyer. Without any of the interim stops. And I did that, and I was always very interested in, not in figures, but in people and in merchandise.
And it worked.
And it worked. And
has it worked? Has it worked
all the way through?
Years?
Yes, I got one promotion after another, and I skipped all the traditional things like like computer and so on and so forth, because we were never good friends. I always, was strictly into people and fashion and the creative part of the field.
How many departments did you work in?
I bought, it was all one department. I bought coats, suits, dresses, knits, hand knits, everything with one assistant.
And you traveled to Europe then?
Kimberly. At that time, I don't know whether you go back to Jack Lazar.
Oh, I certainly do. I certainly do.
He took me to Europe 1 year.
He took you to Europe.
He took me. And then after that, Saks started sending me. I got it. So I was a buyer, and then from the buyer, do you remember Robert Susslow?
Mm-hmm.
He came and he became, and he couldn't believe that I wasn't a merchandise manager, because he had always shopped the department and he'd always liked the items I had and so on, and he said, how come, haven't you got any ambition? And I said, well, I don't like figures, I like people, I like that. We went back to the old thing, creativity and so on. So he said, well, after 3 days, he gave me this job, which I have now, which is merchandise coordinator and senior buyer, which means...
Well, tell us how that operates.
That operates very unorthodox. It doesn't operate like... It doesn't exist. It's a job which was created for me. It's a people job. It's understanding who we're working with at Saks, the people, the sales associates, again, as well as the buyers, selling myself to the buyers, that they have confidence in my judgment, working with designers and manufacturers in the market.
Actually developing products?
On a creative developing product. Going to Europe, coming back, interpreting what I have seen, being inspired from them.
How did that work with Ellen? Wasn't that also Ellen's job?
Yes, but we did never interfere. Yes, it's Ellen's job from a very high fashion point of view. Mine was a little more practical. I can see trends. As I said, I have sort of a nose for trends and a gut feeling for trends. I'm not necessarily the big fashion oracle. I just see things happening and try to translate them into the market and work.
Give me a sense of what the difference for you, as someone who has been part of this organization for these decades, what the difference for you in the last 10 years has been. How has the people changed? How has the store changed? How has your view of what you have to do changed?
Well, things may have changed. They have not changed for me. I've been able to keep my same relationship, whether it was a Robert Suslow or whether it was a Mel Jacobs or a Tansky. I mean, a little more remote. I mean, it's like Suslow walked through that store every day with a little pad and we talk and so on. I mean, today they don't have all the time and they're not that open. But the relationship has actually not changed for me. It's been a wonderful relationship. They've just taken me again to Europe, and I've never felt anything but great cooperation.
I suppose I'm not even talking so much about
my personal.
I'm talking about your responsibilities. Have they changed?
No.
Has the pace of fashion changed
Yes.
the way you've had to see those trends?
Well, yes, I would say the pace of fashion has recently more changed than I've ever seen it change. There isn't such a definite point of view anymore. I mean, there was always a very strong trend and a strong thing. You know, I had quite an issue with the short skirts. As a matter of fact, Ellen and I did not quite agree. I always felt that we had to have an alternative. That's the one time we didn't agree because she was dictating the short skirts. Right. I saw the short skirts. I wore them myself as old as I was, but I insisted that we have to have an alternative for the customer. And I also am enough involved in the actual day-to-day business and enough on the floor watching what's happening with the customer that I could see a definite persistence on some customers. And so we won some by having a new something for them to buy, which they didn't have in the closet, and we lost others because they wouldn't wear it.
Right.
And I felt that we should have an alternative, and that's probably the only time Al and I did not agree.
Let me ask you a little bit about the transplanting of Saks Fifth Avenue across country. The only store to really have done it successfully in that many markets. How did that affect your job?
When you say transplanting,
well, the fact that SFA
so
is USA, yes, you went
so
into
many
so many different parts of the Americas.
It has not affected my job because I had approached, that was one of my great fortes, which unfortunately can't happen. I did a lot of traveling. I developed the California market, for argument's sake. I must take a lot of credit for that. I did that myself. I did a lot. I did 4 trips a year to California. I did 3 trips to Florida. I was very, very into our chain operation and into the different, which unfortunately that has changed. Our buyers are not exposed to that anymore. I would come in on a Saturday to just telephone with each out-of-town manager to find out, what's happening and what do your customers want and all of this. I would say that has changed a little bit. It's not that much of an exposure today. The buyer
doesn't travel.
Well, that's not the buyer's fault. I mean, it's also finance, you know, and though the buyer does not travel anymore, and her
That's
contact
astounding.
and the contact which I had, and I think probably, which I forget when I talk about my job, was a great asset to what I was doing, my constant communication.
Hi, I'm waiting to come in.
All right.
My name is Miss Reese and I have an appointment.
All right. Can you give us about 10 minutes? 5 minutes? 5 minutes?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have something.
All right, 5 minutes. Thanks.
Charlotte, how are you today?
Hi, darling, I'm fine. Communication is a big thing, and I think that is today. Of course, don't forget we have 48 stores. I
Right.
started, with much less, and
Well, I was going to say, how did that shape your thinking in terms of how you cover the market? I mean, you are now not seeing just the New York
I can help
customer.
a lot, and I'm doing it still. I'm trying to still do it. I go, as a matter of fact, right now, I also have to go with one of my buyers in the market. And when we were sitting there and we'll see a line, I will say, well, this is great for Florida, and this is great for California. And color it the proper way. And that, of course, is today quite different from the way it was. I mean, I was completely into it.
You were completely into the New York area before, but now
I was
you.
into everything, and the buyers are still coming. I'm not saying they're not communicating, that it's, on a large scale they are, but it's not the same.
Well, what is the difference?
The difference is that they're not traveling to the area, that some of them have never seen California.
They've never seen the stores? And
A lot of stores they have not seen them. I don't know whether we should.
Oh, no, I
talk
mean,
about
we're
this
just
in any
talking.
way.
No, we're just talking.
We're talking.
That's a tremendous
we're talking off
limitation.
the record,
Yeah,
right?
that's a tremendous limitation.
Yes, it is.
So who's translating to them what those markets were all about?
The out-of-town managers, as opposed to.
And they come in and relate to them.
No, they don't.
They don't.
They don't anymore. They used to. Our couture managers just were in, and that was a very rare trip because so they were in, and they translate, and it was really a pleasure to see that I was with the Yolanda people. Oh, Mrs. So, this is just the perfect dress for Mrs. So and so, and it's kind of thing.
Helpful,
and that's what's
Give
happened.
me your if when you meet people and they know where you're from, and they say to you, "What's special about working at Saks Fifth Avenue?" What do you say? If they ask you, tell us what's special about
what's
working.
special. It's just a very warm, wonderful, understanding store. I've enjoyed every moment. I have been there.
But what's different about it?
What's different about it? I've never worked in another store, so I
You don't know the
couldn't give you
difference.
an honest answer.
You don't know the
I
difference.
only know that I've been no, I've not been interviewed. They've been calling me from not every store, but at least 3 or 4 stores for jobs, and I've never gone for an interview, which must show you that
That's your wedding.
Yes. That
What's
I'm very happy where
what's
I
your
was.
strongest memory of the time you worked with Adam?
Being a merchant, a real merchant.
Which means
Well, it's hard to tell, but hard to put this in other words than a real merchant, which was that he was really involved in the day-to-day business. He walked through the store every day, and he would stop you, and
he was involved.
Yes.
All right. What is the strongest memory you have that you'll take with you from Saks Fifth Avenue now?
Well, the involvement in top management and just, should I say my loyalty to them, which is induced by their way they've been treating me. And now from a personal point of view.
But what about the store itself as it relates to people? What makes Saks Fifth Avenue special for people who come here, do you think?
Are you talking customer-wise
Customer-wise.
or personal-wise?
Customer-wise.
Well, we're trying. I wish we emphasize more a fine specialty store, and
But is
the
it?
whole atmosphere.
Is it?
We're trying to keep on working on it.
And what are the resources that you've worked with that you think have had the greatest staying power as sex as that has had?
You mean talking from still being
Walmart.
here from way back?
Yes.
Well, it's a Bill Blass. There's Bill Blass, and there's Nostra, and and it's all going back.
She
to
can
there.
come in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Now,
very
I
much.
hope that I've been of any
You've
help.
been a help. Thank you.
It's a nice meeting you.
Nice
and
to know
meeting
you.
And
I'm sorry
okay,
that you've been
Hi,
held
that's
up.
all right.
Let's
I do
take
have
a
a lot
glass
to
away
do,
so
so-
you don't.
Will
How
you
are you
introduce
today?
yourself?
Yes.
Just,
Hi.
talking to me.
Hello, my name is Janet Reese, and I am the couture evening buyer, and I am the bridal buyer. And can I help you?
How long have you been with Saks? Oh, she's told me how long she's been here. I'm interviewing you.
I've been here 44 years.
44 years. So you've really been here. You've been here from really Adam's time on.
Yes, I know Mr. Campbell very well.
So give me a sense of what the historical passage has been for you.
I mean, you don't want to know all the things.
I want to remember, from your point of view, what you've taken out of these
Well-
4 decades. You've seen
Well, I was a
Stores
model.
before
I was a model for Mrs. Gimble in the Salon Moderne
You don't have to
for a
talk.
number of
Forget it.
I knew the Gimbles very well. I worked for Mrs. Gimble.
Talk louder.
Okay. I worked for Mrs. Gimble. I was one of Mrs. Gimble's models in the Salon Moderne, which you know is custom order. I don't like to go into it. Well, you ask me questions.
Well, all right. You worked with her, and then what happened?
I knew them, just.
You knew the
very
Gimbles
well.
on a
Yes,
personal
yes,
basis,
Yes, I did.
and you saw the store from the beginning.
Well, not
And
in the beginning.
yeah, well,
The store's
that
been here
that
65
period.
years, so. this
Well,
is not-
these are 4
okay,
decades.
Okay.
And then when did you move into another area?
Are you with FIT?
Yes. Well,
Yes.
I'm a friend of that.
Yeah. Oh, because, I know, what's her name? Very, very well. We were in, what's her name? The building is named after her.
Shirley Goodman.
Yeah, we were in, the Far East together when we went to the fashion group. I do know Shirley quite well.
Mhm.
Okay.
When did you move into merchandising?
Well, I've lived in dairy.
I don't know anything, so you tell me.
I've been a buyer and, I've been a coat buyer. I once bought all the dresses at Saks, the better dresses. I've been a knit buyer, I've been a large size buyer. It's just men.
Are you one of many people who've been here for 4 decades? Are there a lot of people like you?
I have no idea really how many there are.
Well, but you have some sense of, you remember her,
Well, Charlotte happens to be on the same floor as
Yeah.
I am, so.
and you don't have
You
a
know.
sense of anybody else being
Oh,
here?
yes, there are. I know.
There are.
This is Janet Sinner's been here a long time. There's a girl in, a Bureau of Adjustment that's been here a long time.
Why do people stay this long?
How can I dedication.
Well, tell me.
Dedication would be the word.
Well, apart from
And
dedication,
involvement.
what
Well,
makes
do
you
want me to
like
use
it?
all the word? Well, it's involvement. It's a sense of achievement, and it's an involvement, and it's a sense of loyalty.
What are your goals here at Sex with That?
Well, I always wanted to just make a profit, buy and make a profit. As Mr. Kimball said, the difference of profit and loss when I became a buyer.
Tell me, what did he say?
Yeah, he said, Janet, do you know the difference of profit and loss when you make a buyer from being a buyer?
Yeah.
And
what you
say
said.
these things, what are you going to do?
We're just talking. Don't
Yeah,
worry
okay.
about
Well,
it.
I mean,
You're
just-
just talking.
okay,
I'm coming
okay.
to know you, and you're
Okay.
coming to know.
Okay,
I'm trying to get a picture of what
Okay.
Sex with Family is all about.
well, it is an institution, what can I say? And it stands for, quality, and to have the most of the best, as Mr. Cole said. Made a statement to have the most of the best.
Was that goal sustained over 4 decades?
I would say that we have held, our our excellence in wait, there's a word, just a minute, quality, and that's the word, is quality. We have very good quality.
What are the memorable moments for you here in Saks Fifth Avenue? What do you remember as being the high points in your career here?
Well, it's just the word would be,
No, I mean,
and,
I'm talking
yes.
about not general adjectives. Tell me
Yes.
some of the things that you remember that you think about or that you will think about as having been part of the history of this store. What do you remember?
Well, I think that Saks has met the change in the environment, the changes that have happened. I don't know the exact words to tell you, but as lifestyles have changed.
I don't mean that. I mean,
for
for you
we
personally, what do you remember?
Yes,
What do you
when
remember
asked me,
about the
but I just wanna say
experiences
something,
you've had here?
Saks has changed with, from the carriage trade that we had many, many years ago, it has changed to what is happening today. And today is very different from years ago. And so we have, a young customer, and we have changed with the times.
Well, you see that in the bridal department.
Yes.
What's the
our
difference
bridal
in the
department-
brides that you see today and the ones you saw then?
Well, the brides don't really change, don't you? There's some people that want to have a traditional dress, and but that we also go to Europe. We started to go to Europe in 1971. I do buy both bridal and my evening dresses in Europe, and so and we also buy for all the stores. We have 46 stores, as you know.
How do you manage to buy for 40 stores? Are they all very different from your point of view,
Well,
or
you have
what's
to-
the
well,
same
from your
and what's different?
experience, yes. Well, from your experience, the personalities of different stores. We have north, south, east, and west. There are not many stores like ours that buy. Some people, they don't buy for all those 4 areas, and so we know. Well, there is a difference.
There is a difference, you feel.
Oh well, I was once a coat buyer. You don't buy lined coats for the southern stores. You buy coats that are reversible. So
There's climactic differences. But I'm talking in terms of other differences. Are there other differences, or is the taste
Well,
level the
as
same
the years
across
go
country?
by, you see, once there was a very big difference when there wasn't as much traveling, and you would have the Middle West, and they weren't, as what they. But today, the Middle West is, and with television, they're attuned to what's happening today. As far as it used to be, you go from New York,
Right.
that map that they have, and it's New
Yeah,
York, and
yeah,
California. Well,
yeah.
it's not like that anymore.
That's interesting.
Because people, travel so much, and also the media informs people, and they have all these magazines. Yes.
So that does make it a little easier to buy for that many stores.
Well, if you're experienced enough, if you're professional enough, you always try to buy what you think the stores want. Of course, we bring some of those people into New York to work with us in the market. We have
You mean
regional.
the
We have
regional
regional
managers?
market. Yes, we just had them. And we had over 44 people.
Uh-huh.
And then now tomorrow, the reason why I'm in a hurry is tomorrow we're going to go to Owen Mills, the buyers in my area. And then the next day we're going to go to Bergen. So, they do have us,
When people talk to you about Saks Fifth Avenue and they say to you, what makes Saks Fifth Avenue a very special place, what do you say to them?
Well, in the first place, we have also very loyal salespeople, and I always think that the inventory that we have, the salespeople that are very important to us in Saks, is very, very good to personnel. Very, very good to personnel.
So that's one of the distinctions.
Well, I think that's very important, don't you?
Yes.
And so I think that's important. Not only do we have clothes as an inventory, but we also have the salespeople. And they have a feeling of well-being and not, a feeling that, and the store also keeps us informed
Of the people you have worked with and for during these 4 decades, who are the people who you remember the most, who stand out for you?
Well, I will tell you, 15 people have been promoted from my area through the years. I am surrounded by other buyers who have worked as assistants in my office, and I can name them. I can go on and on and on. And either they're in the store or they're elsewhere, but most of them are still here. The person that buys St. John, and who does like $22 million is Mary Ellen Mishenko, and she was my assistant. Phil Winship, who's a very, very, very important buyer in the store, was once my assistant. And so you see, I'm always surrounded by many people where my office is with, and I'm very much in touch with them and were promoted. Recently, the general merchandise manager, Mr. Grossman, called me to ask me, the names of the different people, to remember, where they are, because I believe that they should be promoted and go on from there.
Has there been management that has inspired you? Any particular people that your memory of any of these people?
They change so much. The merchandise managers, there has been a turnover in the merchandising.
Right.
I mean, even our presidents have changed and so on. And so,
okay.
That there is a change.
All right. Anything you would want me to know?
Well, no, it's just that, I'm very proud of the fact that I have been here as long, when I say it's, it's not something that you go and you tell, and some people are always surprised when I tell them, and of course it's a very absorbing kind of a business, and it's not seasonal. It just goes on and all the time. But there are changes in our merchandising. You must know that we're more computerized than we have been before, and the store is computerized. And so there's a computer right in my office, and so I like to think that I have made a contribution. That they split my department a few times. I did $17 million once, and it's split. So,
if the thing you remember about Adam was the profit and loss statement.
Yeah, I was just
talking,
talking
to
Helen O'Hagan, and I was just saying to Helen that we were just talking, Helen and I, while I was waiting, and I just remember being in California with a beau of mine, who was a friend of the Gimbels, and so we were in the home of a very important celebrity. Mr. Gimbel was there. I only thought of this like the last 2 days. And somebody said to him, "How long will you be here, Adam?" And so Mr. Gimbel said, "Well, I have to go back." He said, "After all, Janet and I can't both be away. Janet and I can't both be away at the same time." It was many years ago. At the same time, he said, "So I have to go back." You do remember a thing like that.
Sure.
And
is there something you'll remember about the current management?
And then he said, Jackie, and then he always said, Janet is such a competitor, so I just had to get to it. I was just talking to him.
I love it.
I love it. See, I worked for Mrs. Gimbel, so we took trips with them, as models. She picked a few models when we opened up California, the salon, the custom order salon in Beverly Hills. So when we went with them, we went to Farmers Market. So, I do have recollections. And, it was a happy time.
Is there anything that you remember that anyone's
told?
No, I'm from the current management. Anything that they have said to you that gives you a sense of this moment in time?
Mr. Tansky said, as far as, you're taking care of Janet, because I have had good actresses. And so he has said to the merchandise manager who doles out the money, he said, you're taking care of Janet because my business has been good. So I just want to say
congratulations. And thank you.
Now, what are you going to do with this?
I'm just going to digest it all. Let's turn it off. I'm just going to digest it all. Yeah. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm having a cake.
That's okay. The tape know you're having breakfast.
Okay. I'm Sid Mayer. I started working at Saks in June 1950. I think I've had a career at the company that covers a lot of and touches a lot of bases. I started as a trainee, and then became an assistant buyer, and worked my way through the merchandising ranks in a variety of areas, from assistant buyer to divisional merchandising manager to general merchandising manager. So I would say I have a pretty good familiarity with the merchandising of the company since 1950.
It's 1950.
Since 1950.
Where were you before?
School,
Where'd you go?
Columbia College and
Did
Columbia
they
School of
recruit you
Business.
out of Columbia?
No.
You just came here?
Well,
Did
you know,
you wanted
in
merchandising
1950, it wasn't that easy to get a job. I'm not one of these people who's, trying to say I was born to be a retailer. I was looking for a job when I got out of business school.
That's interesting.
And
Did you have an MBA? Yes.
It's also interesting. I went in the late 1940s, when a lot of people were coming out of the service. Columbia College had something called a professional option program. And in your sophomore year at Columbia College, if you qualified grade-wise, you really didn't have to be a genius. You didn't have to be a straight A student. Not be a dummy. You could apply to graduate school. Engineering, medical, law, business, journalism. I think all five. And they accepted a certain amount of us to accelerate the whole movement of students through Columbia. So I got into Columbia Business School at the equivalent of my third year of college, and got a BS. They didn't give an MBA at that time, or I could have stayed on for, I guess, another year or two to get an MBA.
That's before BS meant something else.
Yeah, before it meant something else. I'm not saying that. And anyhow, and so I came out of Columbia looking for a job, and somebody knew somebody. My father, who was an educator, knew somebody with whom he worked, knew somebody who was here,
Who was the president then?
Adam Gimbel. Adam was
the big
he was
honcho.
the boss, yeah. But FR was very
FR was who?
FR Johnson,
Johnson.
Ellen Johnson.
That's Alan's father.
Right. And he was very active in the company at the time. And the man that my father knew was a man by the name of Hyman Saul. I don't know if you've heard his name today. And he was like the administrative assistant to Adam Gimbel. My understanding is that Adam had met him in some other context. I think he worked for a financial house at the time. He was also an ex-school teacher. And he's the guy I hit it off with. He's the guy who introduced me to FR, and when I was hired, within a couple of days.
Give me a feeling of what the store was like then.
The store was very family-like. Like, I don't know what other people have told you. You've spoken to Helen, you've spoken to Janet. Mr. Gimbel would never talk about people as our customers. He talked about people as our guests. They're our guests. Our competitors were always our friendly competitors.
I understand he was close to Stanley.
He was very close to Stanley. And I guess to, Andrew Goodman also, and I guess there was a little, group that had emerged together. But it was always, there was a strong family feeling.
You know whether he knew Escobosa? Whether he was close to Escobosa at that time?
I don't know. Now the interesting, and I personally think that a lot of the warmth that existed came from Johnson. Mr. Gimbel, was still a little bit removed from the everyday operating of the company. He
was elitist. Very elitist. Was Sophie very evident?
I would say she was evident. My first experiences were working in areas that her merchandise was sold in. I was an assistant buyer in the women's coat and suit department. And we had a merchandising manager by the name of Ham Rubenstein, if you know the name. And he was responsible for all of the merchandise that Sophie manufactured. And we were always looking at it. We had a fashion show. The employees had a fashion show on the what we would now call the designer floor, which we would call the couture merchandise, at least 4 times a week, with 2 house models at a minimum showing merchandise. And Ruby, as we call it, would be the moderator or the commentator. He would do the commentary on it. And so her merchandise was visible to me in my capacity. She herself, I wouldn't say she was extremely visible. The warmth of the company was generated from F.R. Johnson, who was a real people person. He understood.
Apart from telling you that your customers were your guests, what were the other things in your memory that sort of set a criteria for what you were going to do?
Saks label was good enough, was not good enough, was what we should be concerned about. We shouldn't be concerned about, other types of names. So I worked as a designer.
Even then? They didn't embark on that program to take off the design names until the 60s, right?
To take them off, but we didn't put them on initially unless they were, quite important.
You really had your own label.
We had our own labels. Was really what we featured.
So
we had Norman Norell, and we had Philip
Talk to me about that.
Well, the area I worked in, we had a few people who were important to us in concert in most cases with saxophone. So we had Traynor Norell was an important resource of ours. Maurice Rentner, I guess, when Bill Blass was just was a designer. Janet and Charlotte should know this better than I. Ben Zuckerman.
They don't find it easy to talk as you do.
Ben Zuckerman. No, that could be good. Ben Gershel. Carmel. Montesano.
Raggy
was a sportswear, and that was came a little bit later. Also, he was on a different floor. It was on the sportswear floor.
Kimberly.
Right, Kimberly was on the 3rd floor, which was merchandised by Gordon Franklin, who then became president of the company when Adam died. The changes were made.
I had forgotten that.
Yeah. So Gordon was the sports. Calvin Klein was down there, just beginning as a coat manufacturer, coat designer.
That early?
Well,
I think
much
later.
when I say I
came later.
I was with the company through this period for 5 or 6 years. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I was still down there in the mid 1957. Probably I left to go into the men's area.
Then let's talk a little bit about the men's area. Nobody really talks about that. That has always been your sleeper, most wonderful department.
I'll tell you an interesting story about the men's, and what really probably was the basis of the success of it. A couple things were the basis of it. When the war came, I was not here. This is a story that's been told to me, but I know it's not apocryphal. This is true. Because the merchandising manager was my boss. When the war came and the PXs were doing most of the businesses with the officers, Adam Gimbel spoke to the divisional merchandising manager and said, we should be selling the uniforms to the officers because they can be our future customers for menswear when the war is over. And we went into that business. And he said, I don't care if we don't make any money. There's no margin. That's how we're going to capture customers. And we used to go with a tailor and a sales associate to the graduations, particularly of the Navy classes in Newport News or somewhere in Florida where they had the naval bases, here in New Jersey, Rhode Island, and to some of the military bases. And we made a lot of uniforms and sold a lot of uniforms, right up to some things for General MacArthur, some things for And sure enough, when the war ended, and again, this is stories were told to me because I was very friendly with the salesman. When I came there, I was an assistant buyer and related very well to the sales staff. So I was a group of the salesmen. So they told me some of the stories from the mid to late 40s. Clothes were in a very short supply. But Saks had, one, a relationship with the manufacturers because they had been making uniforms for them, and two, with this group of customers who were now being discharged who had had their uniforms with Saks and Fayette Arrangement. And they were in such, clothes were in such short supply, they had a barrier erected of some sort. And people would just like, the salesman would climb over to get a suit for a customer, get two suits for a customer. It was such a coup as far as the customer was concerned. And the men's clothing business at Saks, which people do not speak about because they don't know very much about, fabulous, fabulous.
Has always been.
And has from that
The sleeper
right,
department.
starting that.
Why does it remain the sleeper department?
Well, I don't know. It doesn't.
With Bergdorf doing now what it's going to be doing on men's. Why is the men's?
I'll give you my personal. I'll give you my
a
personal
sleeper
feeling.
department?
My personal feeling is that a lot of what Saks does. Saks is not has never been. Maybe that stems to Adam Gimbel, a publicity conscious company. They have never been big at blowing their own horn or calling papers and saying, "Hey, we have a story for you." We have never had the same type of relationship with the press about certain things that we've done. People in the industry know that the men's is a very, very strong part of the business. People in the magazines, the Gentleman's Quarterly, Esquire Group, they know that Saks is a real, very important factor in the menswear business. Second thing that made our men's business terrific, incidentally, was, remember Dupioni silk when they started what we called it Pesante, which means heavy in Italian. We had a fabric department. We used to sell fabrics, and I guess for draperies, we had a Colin Comfort shop. Remember the Colin shop?
Yes.
And the man who merchandised that was a man by the name of Martin Stringer. And Martin went to Europe looking for all these different interesting fabrics that he sold by the yard, and found this, the way I understand it from him, found this very interesting silk, very nubby, and our clothing people at the time, he brought it to them, and they recognized the potential for suits. And we had our own clothing factory. We owned a clothing factory up until a few years ago. And we started to make that suit in our own fabric. That silk suit was huge, huge success. And that also, contributed to the great success of men's.
Bring me up to date.
Up to date, we don't have the factory.
Tell me the things that make it
Great today, I think.
No, tell me what gives SFA the ability to transport itself cross country.
I think central. Are we still okay?
Yeah, I think so.
I think central buying contributes to it. I've always learned and taught there has to be a raison d'etre for Saks to be in a city. And the raison d'etre has to be that we are bringing something that people know about Saks Fifth Avenue in New York to an area. They don't need another store in most of the communities that we go. So we have to transport that which we do best here to those.
What do you do best?
I think we select better merchandise. I think we are.
You're better selectors. Better editors.
I think we're better selectors. I'm not saying we're better selectors totally. I mean, that would be a little arrogant. I don't really. I think we're better selectors of better merchandise. So we're familiar with it. I guess Neiman Marcus is. Ain't no flies on Neiman Marcus. But for that type of merchandise, of couture designer, better sportswear designer, top-end clothing makers for men's, better except they were good selectors. I think that service is everybody's buzzword. That's a shtick. I think we make a genuine effort. I'm not saying that we're infallible by any means, but I think as it relates to a lot of communities, we bring good service, and we bring excellent presentation. We present our stores well, and consumer reports or inquiries that we have made when we've done consumer research indicates one of the things that customers like best about us is that we have an ease of shopping that a lot of stores don't have.
Well, this store is designed, like what you people did with the escalator. Absolute genius.
Our stores make sense, and it's very interesting when you do some consumer research, what people,
Get back to you.
Yeah, we'll get back to you. That's one of the things they like best. There are a lot of people say that. Nordstrom's is confusing, or Bloomingdale's is confusing, or Macy's is confusing. And it could be. But this really did.
You can walk Saks Fifth Avenue.
Right. And in the branch stores, our stores, in the branch stores, in those communities, our stores do stand out in appearance. The quality, there's no stinting in quality of materials and fixturing. And it usually is
You mean the environment.
usually the environment is something special. Plus, I think a very important thing, we started early. We paid our dues, we learned our lessons before some other people did. Because Adam is a visionary. To me, this is one of the things that he was really a visionary about, was branch store merchandising.
Tell me about that.
He's a guy, after we were in business a few years, opened a store in Beverly Hills, California, because his friends lived in Beverly Hills. I mean, our first stores were Southampton, Palm Beach, Beverly Hills.
He followed his customers.
Absolutely, he followed our
That was the first service concept.
Yeah, right, absolutely. It was a first.
Well, would you say that the sense of following your customer, wherever your customer is, was extended from the idea that Adam perceived, which is that this elitist customer following had a playground in which they spent certain seasons, to the idea of the Saks Fifth Avenue customer that is now not only mobile, is moving to other states, but that the Saks Fifth Avenue customer exists as in demographic or in psychographic terms in other cities as it parallels what we have here in New York. What was the
Yes, I think it started with the follow the customer to his or her playground.
Right.
The recognition that a city like Beverly Hills was a combination of a playground and an extension of New York. Adam knew a lot of people in show business, and I think he probably was familiar.
Bi-coastal commuting.
Yeah, right. And he understood bi-coastal commuting. And then the next logical place where we did open a store, because there were our customers existing, Chicago. It was a cosmopolitan city, and there were enough people who understood what we were about, and we understood what they were about
to make the transfer.
And the city after that, if I'm not mistaken, was Detroit.
And why Detroit?
Well, Detroit, we were in the Fisher Building. Our store was right where General Motors was.
So it was really a targeted, selective market.
I think so. And
like the Army. Like the Army.
Absolutely. And that customer in Detroit, its playground was Petoskey. We had a little store in Petoskey, Michigan, which was their resort area.
Now, was that? Did you have a bigger men's business in Detroit than you had a women's business?
No.
So then where did the women come from, the general, in that building, the Fisher Building?
No, I guess at that time there was no stigma to driving downtown to come from Grosse Pointe. We had a big Grosse Pointe business. Now, I think we might have had a lot of fashion shows. We might have had a lot of stimulation to bring them in. I'm not positive. I'm not sure.
Why would he not have thought that they would come to Chicago? Why Detroit?
Well, Chicago was before.
I know.
Detroit.
I'm saying, why would he have not thought that Grosse Pointe, shopping for that quality customer, would come to Chicago? Didn't have to do it in. That's a curious one.
I don't know. I don't know. A lot of stores are open because you get a great real estate deal, and then the people who are selling you the concept are pretty good sellers also. But both Chicago and Detroit were successful.
Is Detroit still successful?
No, Detroit's gone.
Detroit's gone. Or what after Detroit do you mean?
Well, I think that then it gets a little trickier. I'm not great
No,
on dates.
I don't care.
Florida.
Let's take Florida.
Miami and we had a store.
Certainly follow your customer base.
We went to Miami. We had a store in Surfside. We had and I guess the next step after that will probably be White Plains, where we started to go to the suburbs.
Now, did store content have to change?
Store content was up to the merchants to change. Yes, it had emphasis change. Emphasis change. But we were in this game early, and we were learning that emphasis changed. We learned that weights change, that color changes, sizes change in community. And even years ago, I remember when I was a men's buyer, California was always health conscious. You had to buy, tall, thin 40 longs for California. For Florida, you bought 40 shorts. And in the Midwest, the guys were bigger. And the same thing applies for women. And because we started early, we paid our, as I said, we paid our dues and we learned. And we are, therefore, I think, good at merchandising and understanding branches. Not that we do everyone perfectly or we're even close to doing it imperfectly, but I think some of the major stumbling blocks that stores encounter of merchandising emphasis changing, we learned early on.
You still talk of it as a branch, when in reality, White Plains is no longer a branch.
Yeah, I guess.
It's interesting. Right. I'm just playing these words out with you because I'm learning as I'm listening to you. What began as a branch store, White Plains is now a whole new. It's what we call Newtown, USA, isn't
Right.
it? Yeah. So that's also a change in the geography of retailing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, no question about that. But that's all retailing.
You're aware of what we
Yeah.
mean with White Plains having changed. It's become business, residential, it's corporation stuff.
No question about that. So we went through a period of stores, White Plains, Springfield, New Jersey.
Springfield, New Jersey.
Oh, yeah,
What's
what's
in Springfield, New Jersey?
Well, you have that summit area, you have wealth.
Wow.
Yeah, Springfield. Plus, Adam had a summer home in Deal, which, I guess not terribly far from there.
You still have Springfield, New Jersey?
Oh, yeah, Springfield, New Jersey, good store, sure.
Mm-hmm.
And Skokie, outside of Chicago, also I'm trying to think of that period of when we were opening stores, Fort Lauderdale.
He was looking for, he had his sights on Apples, didn't he?
Yeah, now I don't know at what point decisions were no longer Adams, and they became Alan Joseph, Jeff, our son, and then became a very active member of the company.
Yeah.
And
well, I'll be talking to Alan, so he'll tell me.
yeah, well,
He'll
Alan,
pick it up.
certainly is.
He'll pick it up.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to know what other.
I think their very initial decision. Incidentally, Alan was manager of the Detroit Star for a period. He lived in Detroit.
Yes.
But he, I guess Adam was in certainly in the Southampton, Palm Beach, Beverly Hills, and then I guess the Chicago, Detroit decisions.
All right. In the last 5 years, which of the openings do you feel has represented a kind of quantum leap and change from the beginning? From the beginning.
Well, the last two stores
you traveled your
the two stores that have impressed me the most that we've recently opened are Boca Raton and Minneapolis.
Two very different reasons.
Very different reasons, but two stores that I personally impressed by. Where they have gone from what we initially did. Stores had escalators to begin with. We never had stores with escalators.
What does the escalator mean to you?
For a customer, it is a
Fast transport?
fast, and it's an easy transport, but people may not do it. I think there are times people just don't go in the elevator. Go wait for the elevator, go in the elevator. I'm not sure what's on that floor. I can't see it. plus the visual
Access.
access plus visibility. You're going up an escalator.
Seeing a
You're
store.
seeing the store. You're seeing what you're coming to, and you're seeing what you're going from. That was a big, as you said, made a huge difference in New York.
And you did it masterfully.
Yeah. Well,
Masterfully. Who did that, Hamburg?
no, that was before Hamburg. I think that was.
Brilliant.
No, I don't think that was. It may have been Hamburg, wasn't it? It was Suslow at that time.
I thought it was Hamburg.
And no, Suslow was the chairman.
Yeah, I know, but I thought
President said it could have been Terrell. It could have been Jim Terrell who did it.
I can check that out. Let's make a note.
Yeah, it could have been Hamburg Terrell.
I'd also love
If
to
they
get
did it
some
with an early on
sketches.
with
I'd
us.
like to get some sketches of from the architectural firm on that escalator. That was a major change. Would you say it was a major change
yeah.
in the selling
I'm not
environment of Saks?
positive that it wasn't Copeland Nova. Was it? If it wasn't Hamburg, it could have been Copeland Nova.
Couple of Novak.
Yeah. It could have been.
Okay, so tell me, what's with Minneapolis?
Well, as I say, it's a several level store. It's an urban store in in an urban metropolis, and there, as I said before, we don't stint on on fixturing or interiors. This store has the best of everything. Really, to me, it's just a great looking.
Who did that one?
I think that might be stress. I'm not positive.
How do you see the people in Minneapolis as Saks Fifth Avenue people? How many do you think are? They're certainly not. It's unlike Florida. You don't have a transplanted New York market.
One of the things I do in my job is I go to these communities once or twice before we open the store to bring back a point of view to the merchants as to what the competitors do and what the customer looks like. It is a store where weather is is more important factor than probably any previous store that we have. Cold weather.
I know.
And incidentally, we always do well in cold weather stores. And our best franchise is probably in the Midwest, where we don't have as much competition, and we do very good coat jobs and cold weather clothes. We seem to be good at that.
Your walkways there.
Yeah, and the walkways are, somebody can go in there and spend his whole life without going outside.
I know.
But we seem to have understood what the Minneapolis customer. There are quite a few sophisticated people in Minneapolis. Not as many evening functions and black tie functions
Well, it's
as some of others.
It's culturally aware.
They're absolutely
Very culturally dynamic.
but also very outdoorsy. They're big for outdoor sports, boating and skiing and snow sports, and those things are very big. They're and physically larger. But it's a beautiful store. Not a heavily competitive arena yet. Nordstrom's and Bloomingdale's will be there at some point, as will Neiman's. Neiman's will be there in the same shopping area that we are, and Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom will be about a half hour away from that as well. But right now, Dayton's is a powerhouse, no question about it. But still, for our store, which is at a level just right, Boca is our being in the right place at the right time, but the customer being in that, really coming to that area, our customer moving into Boca in great numbers. That's a red hot community.
Change ethnic customer? Changing
Very
ethnic.
heavily Jewish, where our business always does well. But pulling from between Palm Beach and Fort Lauderdale, and it's the right place at the right time.
When you
Well, at
meet
the same time, we won't stores.
When you
Always
meet
no
people,
place.
when you meet people and they say to you, "My God, you spent a lifetime here,"
Yeah.
what do you tell them about why?
I'm not sure why.
What's the magic that holds you here? Besides tenure and security and all the other stuff.
I grew up in the men's end of the business. That's where I spent most of my time. It is not rare for people in the men's business. It's rare for people today in retail to be in the same place for a long time. It was not when I started in the men's area rare. My boss had been at Saks. My two bosses, my buyer and my merchandising manager when I was an assistant, had been at Saks or Saks 34th Street, or back to Saks longer than I've been here. The sales staff with whom I worked,
Sorry.
almost every one of them was here over 20, 25 years. People with whom I did business, manufacturers, have all been, there's been a constant. There have not been a lot of change. So I guess, you know, at first it did not, the first 20 years it did not seem unusual at all to me. Then maybe the combination of security and plus I don't know if it was the smartest decision. If you really put me to the wall and said, you're so smart doing that, I'm not so sure that it was.
If, in retrospect, you walk away from SFA, USA, tomorrow, what will you remember of this time now?
I don't know, you know, attitudinally it is so different. I guess from my observation, if I was looking at it with a certain objectivity, I think it transcends Saks. I think it's the attitude toward retailing in total, that the ties and loyalties are not the same as they were. Maybe the entire business community, not only retailing.
And I would agree with you.
Yeah,
That's
so,
the
you know,
whole economy.
Right, so maybe our whole economy has changed, that people don't feel the same bonds.
Are there any redeeming things? I mean, the
Yeah.
negatives I
Yes,
know,
the
and you and I
redeeming-
know.
yeah,
What's the plus? You gave
It's
me
a
a
more-
plus in the beginning.
yeah.
What's the plus now?
Oh, it's a much more exciting business. It's a more dynamic business. It is a business that maybe nature of my own exposure, because I'm exposed to all parts of the business today. Geographically, it's a much more extensive company. It's a bigger company. The numbers that you're dealing with are bigger. The importance of every decision is greater.
The adrenaline flows.
The adrenaline flows. I think it flows. I mean, for me, 40 years later, so I'm 40 years older.
But you're maybe 40 years younger.
Yeah,
You're
right. So I
maybe 40
don't feel, you know, that the company was so much more exciting then. I think it's more exciting now.
You do?
Yeah.
Well, that's an important thing for you to say to me.
Yeah, I think the company is more exciting.
Would you have said that if I hadn't prodded you?
Well, if you had asked me a general question of, I assumed you would ask a question of like, similar to that, and I would I was prepared to, thinking of a little bit about it.
It's nerve-wracking, and certainly what you're going through right now is unfair. You say life is unfair.
But I've always felt, when I talk to trainees or I interview candidates for the company, I don't always say it, but I really feel it. There's a certain mentality that will allow you to succeed in retailing. And there's a certain mentality, no matter how smart and intelligent you are, it's very difficult to succeed in retailing.
What is it?
And you have to be willing to realize that that there are going to be decisions that have to be made, that there is a certain constant change, and this being on edge can't throw you.
Or that it's a
Or
plus.
that it's a plus. That the adrenaline flowing is a plus, or certainly not something that can allow you to go into a shell and not perform.
And that the ephemeral defines fashion.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the ephemeral defines fashion? Defines?
Fashion is ephemeral.
Oh, yeah, no question. no question
And so
about it.
therefore our business,
Yeah. Oh,
the
yeah.
fact that our business has become less and less predictable is almost a metaphor for the business.
It
isn't
is, and to a certain group of people, that's attractive. To a certain group of people, it's a turn off because they're not prepared to deal with it. But they can deal with other things, and those people should not think in terms of retailing as a lifetime profession. If they get a taste of it, to prepare for something else. So I always feel that the fact that there's uncertainty or there's change, when you go into retailing, you make that your career.
That's what you know is it.
You know it's going to be.
It goes with the territory.
If you're going to be a doctor, you know you're going to work crazy hours if you're
It's a very good thing for us to end our interview on. I'd like to only ask one other thing. As you know, the award is going to the store that makes the difference. Do you think Saks Fifth Avenue has made the difference?
Unequivocally.
Huh?
Unequivocally.
Unequivocally.
Yes.
Why, in one sentence?
I think Saks is a unique store that has managed for 65 years to bring quality merchandise to the consumer in a variety of localities like no other store has been able to do.
Thank
You
Did you enjoy the interview?
very much.
I enjoyed talking to you. I enjoyed talking to you.
Are you with FIT or are you?
I'm